Welcome to Lesson 12 for Unit C.4. My name is Daniel DC, and I use OpenSciEd in my classroom. In Lesson 12, we begin bridging the gap between pure chemistry and the engineering design, allowing our students to consider applications to our studies beyond just the classroom. Let's begin by anchoring our storyline with where we've been up to this point. And in Lesson 11, students were in deep collision theory and particle modeling. They figured out that bumping up temperature or reactant concentration physically speeds up the reaction rates by increasing collision frequency and force. They also modeled how adding crushed calcium carbonate provides extra carbonate ions to support shell building while slightly reversing acidification. Coming into today, the underlying question shifts from can we make this reaction happen chemically to how do we actually evaluate these chemical interventions against social, environmental, and technical constraints in the real world. Let's take a look at the overall design for Lesson 12, which is a one-day putting pieces together and problematizing lesson. There are no wet labs, titration setups, or student devices needed, but the teacher guide still calls for about 30 minutes of prep time, which should drop dramatically after the first time you teach this lesson. In my experience, that prep time is entirely about knowledge management. You'll want to get your chart paper hung, markers out, sticky notes prepped, and fresh copies of previous readings printed so students can dive straight into sense making without logistical delays. When I look at how the storyline unfolds across this lesson, I think about it as one continuous sense-making loop. Students start by inventorying possible solutions and looking back at our class carbon cycle model to ensure their ideas address macro-level Earth systems. From there, they layer in community priorities to account for the competing needs and values of the impacted community. As groups pick a promising solution and try to work through initial stoichiometry calculations, they run into a wall because they lack specific measurements like water volume. That realization helps them see that to develop and calculate a practical solution, they genuinely need specific site profiles to understand the local context and scale before moving forward. By the end of Lesson 12, our students locked down three core engineering ideas. First, engineering solutions must satisfy societal requirements, not just technical or scientific ones. Second, criteria and constraints are deeply interrelated and often contradictory, meaning trade-offs are required. And third, specific quantifiable criteria and constraints depend on context. We have to know where and with whom we are working before we can finalize a real design. Now let's transition to some key instructional moments of Lesson 12. In our first key moment for Part 2, students review their progress trackers, write potential solution ideas on sticky notes, and bring them up to a central board to cluster them. We want to see students crowding around chart paper, debating how to group sticky notes like add base to water or plant seagrass. High schoolers naturally default to localized micro-level interventions, usually suggesting that we dump chemicals directly into local oyster hatchery tanks. What I watch for is whether or not students start looking beyond the water column. If they focus exclusively on the hydrosphere, I point to the atmosphere and geosphere in our carbon cycle model poster on the wall and ask, are there places up here that we might intervene? That simple prompt pushes them towards macro-level Earth systems thinking, leading to sticky notes about kelp restoration or reducing fossil fuel emissions. For our second key moment in Part 3, students pull out their Discuss Interested Party readings from Lesson 7 and discuss the specific requirements of poultry farmers, oyster growers, tribal nations, and restaurant owners. In the classroom, you want to hear table groups arguing over whether a rapid chemical treatment that helps an aquaculture business might disrupt wild harvest traditions guaranteed by tribal treaties. This moment matters because it elevates engineering beyond pure chemistry into cultural, economic, and social realities. It helps students see that a chemically sound idea can still fail in practice if it harms the local community. What I watch for here is how students process conflicting priorities. To make these trade-offs visible, I stand at the chart paper mapping their ideas, drawing green lines between aligned goals and drawing thick red X's between conflicting ones. Seeing that red X between corporate profit margins and undisturbed wild harvest makes the concept of design trade-offs tangible and real to them. In the final key moment, groups pick one promising solution from their board and pull out scratch paper to start mapping out an implementation plan and initial stoichiometry math. As you look around the room, you should see students writing out molarity equations or acid-base neutralization ratios, only to suddenly stop mid-calculation with some confused expressions. This is the problematizing moment of the lesson. They try to calculate how many moles of neutralizing agent or calcium carbonate they need, but they hit an absolute wall because they don't know the volume of the water they are treating or whether they are in an indoor tank or an open bay. What I watch for is the initial instinct to step in and rescue them, which is hard to resist as teacher, but my move here is to let them struggle productively. I walk over to stuck groups and simply ask, how much of your substance do you actually need? And what specific numbers are you missing to help you calculate that? They realize that on their own, they can't do the math without specific site level data, which creates the genuine need for us to move forward into lesson 13. Students leave class staring at incomplete calculations, fully aware that engineering is context dependent. I preview for them that in our next class, they will receive specific site profiles, complete with the exact water volumes, locations, and community stakeholder details, so they can finally run their numbers and refine their designs. We can now look at the classroom management and practical setup strategies for this lesson. One practical piece of advice is to print fresh class copies of the discuss interested party readings from lesson 7, covering those poultry farmers, Northwest Indian fisheries, oyster farmers, and restaurant personnel. While students should have these in their binders, having fresh sets in the middle of each table eliminates that friction of digging through papers to find it. It keeps students from spending 10 minutes digging through their wrinkled notebook pages and allows them to just jump straight into analyzing community priorities. When students are brainstorming solution ideas on sticky notes at the start of the lesson, I explicitly remind them to defer judgment. High school students can be hesitant to voice unusual ideas out of fear of peer reaction. I tell them that wild or untested ideas like building a giant dome over an entire bay belong on a sticky note just as much as standard lab interventions that we've seen in class. The criteria constraints phase will naturally filter out unworkable concepts later on. Early on, our goal is high volume, creativity, and psychologically doing this in a safe environment. It's important to recognize that oysters are not automatically compelling to every student. To build authentic engagement, I remind the class of the videos from lesson 1, showing that oysters are a vital first food and a matter of food sovereignty for indigenous communities. If you teach in a landlocked or urban area, it can be helpful to connect this to local agricultural supplies or regional foods for your students' families rely on, recognizing that protecting a local food source is a universal human priority raises the stakes of the chemistry work that we're engaged in. Regarding vocabulary management, there's no new words earned or encountered in lesson 12, and today we're focused entirely about putting previously earned language to work. As far as poster management, bring out the class carbon cycle model from lesson 11 and make sure it's predominantly displayed on your wall. You will build a new class chart summarizing the criterion constraints identified from community priorities. And a tip here is do not erase or throw away this new chart at the end of the day. It serves as a foundational rubric that students will use to evaluate and refine their final design solutions throughout the rest of the unit. And finally, make sure students take a few minutes to update their individual progress trackers. That brings us to the end of our preparation for lesson 12. Next up in lesson 13, they'll get their hands on specific site profiles to refine their plans and quantify their chemical impacts. Thank you for taking the time to learn how to implement lesson 12. Good luck. You got this.